For centuries, the galaxy had watched humanity with curiosity. They called them peacekeepers, those strange creatures from a blue world that always tried to talk before they fought, that built hospitals instead of fortresses on the planets they settled, that sent relief ships even to their rivals. They smiled, they shared, they traded. They spoke of peace as if it were a sacred code carved into their bones. Every major empire believed humans were harmless, a strange kind of idealistic species that had wandered too far into a galaxy ruled by stronger civilizations. That belief lasted until the day the galaxy truly met them. It began on the Outer Rim, where the Trade Accord Council sent its fleets to claim a system rich in resources. The system was quiet, its planets lush and full of life. One of them, a green world the humans called Haven, held a colony of barely 50,000 settlers. Farmers, teachers, engineers, children. They lived under the flag of the United Coalition of Earth, believing themselves safe under the treaties that promised no empire would attack a developing colony. But greed has a way of making the powerful forget promises. The Velran Dominion, a race known for their vast armadas and their pride in conquest, decided to take Haven. They expected no resistance. Humans, after all, were peacekeepers. They would surrender, file a protest with the council, and wait for negotiations to fail while their people were quietly removed. That was the story the Velran fleet told themselves when they entered Haven's orbit. The invasion began at dawn. Metallic clouds filled the sky as plasma fire turned the upper atmosphere into rivers of light. The small colony had no defenses worth naming, only weather towers and communication satellites. Within minutes, those were gone. The Velran general broadcast a message across the surface promising mercy if the humans surrendered. Silence answered him. The soldiers landed expecting panic. Instead, they found an empty town. Fields still warm from morning light. Homes open but quiet, food half-eaten on tables. There were no people. Only the sound of wind and the occasional creak of wood. Then, one by one, patrols started to vanish. The general assumed it was sabotage. Maybe traps, maybe cowardice. He ordered drones to sweep the area. They found nothing, only traces of footprints leading into the surrounding forests and caves. He sent more troops in. They too vanished. No comms, no signals, no remains. By nightfall, the first screams came through the channels. What the Velrans did not understand, what no one in the galaxy had understood, was that humanity had not survived its own history by being soft. Peace was not their weakness. It was their camouflage. They had learned long ago that to build a world you had to know when to hide your claws. When the Velrans came for Haven, the colonists did not run. They moved underground into tunnels their ancestors would have called shelters, but that the engineers had quietly expanded into networks of steel and rock. The farmers carried hunting rifles once used on wild animals. The teachers carried hand-built EMP grenades made from mining parts. The engineers armed the drones used for surveying soil samples, turning them into silent watchers in the dark. By the time the second day came, the Velrans began to realize they were not fighting farmers. The humans struck only when they were sure. A lone soldier, separated from his unit, would vanish into smoke. A supply drop would explode before reaching the ground. Night patrols found their vision sensors jammed by unseen interference, their own shadows turning against them. The Velrans tried to respond with overwhelming force, burning entire forests to ash, but the humans had already moved. They never stayed still, never attacked from the same place twice. Reports came to the Dominion fleet that the humans were few, perhaps only 1,000 active fighters. Yet their attacks felt like the work of thousands. The Velran general demanded reinforcements, fearing that a hidden army was on the surface. None came. The Dominion believed him weak for struggling against farmers. The next day, the general's command ship fell silent. From orbit, the rest of the fleet saw their flagship explode in a perfect sphere of light. No enemy ships were visible. The scanners picked up only fragments of metal drifting into the void. In the command rooms of other empires, observers watched through shared feeds. They thought it must be a trick, perhaps sabotage from within. But the truth became clear when a human transmission was intercepted. It was short, quiet, and calm. Don't mistake patience for weakness. The message spread through the networks of the galaxy like a storm. The Velran fleet panicked. They bombarded the planet relentlessly, determined to erase every trace of human resistance. For 2 weeks, they rained destruction on Haven until nothing green remained. When the bombardment ended, they sent drones to confirm their victory. They found nothing. No bodies, no weapons, no ruins that suggested life had ever been there. Just silence. And then, days later, the first Velrun ship in orbit went dark. Its lights blinked out one by one. The next ship tried to scan it and also went silent. Within hours, 4 ships disappeared from every tracking system. The last transmission from one vessel showed human figures in vacuum suits moving through the corridors of the captured ships, cutting power lines, disabling systems, moving like shadows. The Velrans finally fled, abandoning the planet and half their fleet. They called for help from the Council, screaming about human treachery, about monsters wearing friendly faces. The Council tried to calm them, but whispers began to spread among every race. Stories of old human wars resurfaced, wars they had studied but never believed. A species that had once nearly destroyed itself with weapons that could burn continents. A species that treated peace not as an instinct but as a choice. The galaxy had admired humanity for their kindness. Now they feared them for their restraint. Weeks later, when investigators from the Council reached Haven, they found it reborn. The humans had returned from the underground tunnels. They were rebuilding with the same steady patience that had once built their great cities on Earth. There was no celebration, no boasting. When the investigators asked about the destroyed fleet, the colony leader only said, "We defended our home." That answer unsettled the Council more than any confession could have. In the following months, strange reports emerged across the Outer Rim. Pirates disappeared after raiding human freighters. Raiders who had once targeted helpless transports found themselves hunted instead. Entire hideouts went silent, their beacons showing only static. The pattern was the same. Humans struck fast, left nothing behind, and never spoke of it. Their fleets began to move quietly through trade lanes. Their ships often unarmed on the surface, but equipped with hidden systems that no outsider was allowed to study. Soon, even the major powers began to take notice. The Galactic Federation sent envoys to Earth urging restraint. The Dominion rebuilt its fleet and stationed it far from human space, no longer eager for another confrontation. Yet curiosity burned stronger than fear. Scholars, diplomats, even spies tried to learn how humans had done it, how they had turned a colony with no army into a fortress. They never got a clear answer. Human archives showed no details, only records of evacuation drills, agricultural work, and construction projects. Their military reports were sealed. Their leaders simply smiled when asked, saying only, "We prefer peace, but peace must be guarded." In time, the story of Haven became legend. Children across the stars were told that humans were strange, that they smiled even as they prepared for storms. Explorers whispered that to fight them was to wake something ancient, a memory buried deep in their DNA, a memory of survival through fire and chaos. Decades passed. Humanity spread further, colonizing new worlds. They joined councils, signed treaties, and continued to speak softly. But the galaxy had changed. Every diplomat now looked twice before raising their voice in a human negotiation. Every empire calculated its moves carefully when trade disputes involved Earth. The image of gentle peacekeepers was gone, replaced by something quieter but heavier, respect born of fear. One quiet evening, aboard an orbital station above Haven, an old Velrun scholar watched the green planet below. He had been a young officer during the invasion, one of the few who had escaped before the fleet vanished. Time had dulled his bitterness but not his curiosity. He had spent decades studying humans, trying to understand how they had done it. He finally met a human scientist working on the same station, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice. Over tea, he asked her the question that had haunted him for years. "Why did your people not strike first when you knew we were coming?" She smiled faintly. "Because we hoped you would turn away. We always hope for peace, but when we didn't." Her smile faded into something colder, older. Then we stopped hoping. The Velrun sat in silence, realizing that there was no anger in her tone, only truth. Humanity did not fight for revenge. They fought because they understood the cost of letting violence grow unchecked. They hunted not for glory but for survival. They were patient because they could be, and terrifying because they chose to wait until no other path remained. When the scholar returned to his quarters, he wrote one final entry in his journal. "The galaxy once thought humans were peacekeepers. We were wrong. They are hunters who prefer not to hunt, but when they do, nothing escapes. He sent the entry to the Federation archives, where it was quietly filed and forgotten by bureaucrats who found it poetic, but exaggerated.